Need to call to order the November 14, 2016 Lawrence Board of Education meeting. Do we have a motion for approval of agenda?
I'll move approval.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, you'll notice that we've rearranged the order of the agenda this evening. So the first item is the President's report. I'm going to discuss kind of the thinking behind that reordering in a second here, but I wanted to say a few words a bit about kind of some current events things relative to what's gone on over the last week. So I know that many of us are still coming to grips with the results of last Tuesday's elections. For many, it seems like we took a step back or even a leap backwards with regards to what we thought had been progress addressing different aspects of institutionalized discrimination. And we're struggling to come to grips with that. Many of us are in various states of bereavement and disillusionment because it seems clear that institutionalized and individual racism and gender discrimination are still alive and well in our nation for a variety of reasons. And I acknowledge that for many minorities, that's not really a surprise at all, but business as usual relative to different aspects of their own day-to-day experiences. Personally, I'm still processing what this says about where we are as a nation, what it means for us as a community, and how we move forward. But one thing I do know is that our public schools have a critical role to play in tearing down these walls of racism and gender discrimination. By creating and maintaining equitable educational environments for our students, teachers, and staff, we shed light on the nature of our current and social injustices, help inoculate the next generation against negative stereotypes and memes of hate and ignorance, and provide them with needed tools for addressing social injustices when they see it in the world. I reiterate my personal support for our equity work that was stated in the letters read during the last board meeting, and I'm sure that my fellow board members and the superintendent would reiterate that as well. And I was heartened somewhat by the results of our state-level elections. We may now have a mix of moderate Republicans and Democrats in our legislature capable of forming coalitions to turn the state around with regards to tax policy and education. But the external and internal threats to our equity work are real. They threaten to delay and derail the progress we've made and the work we want to continue to do. And we must continue having conversations about what we're doing, continue having civil discourse. We must continue assessing how our actions are working and make course corrections when necessary. And we must continue supporting and growing our equity champions and building and maintaining trust with one another. And part of that requires really listening to one another. So in the spirit of listening to one another, we've heard comments from the community with regards to how we structure the board meetings. And the order of tonight's meeting is an initial attempt to address those comments. We've been aware of the awkwardness and sterileness of how we handle public comments. We felt it ourselves, and we heard community members pointedly express that as well during the last board meeting. So let me explain the ordering of the agenda, my thoughts, processes behind that, and then if there are any board questions or comments, let's go ahead and address those at this time. And if any audience members wish to comment on the meeting structure itself, we invite you to do so during the patron comments. So I've moved the board president's and the superintendent's reports up towards the front of the meeting. And if there happens to be any type of recognition, that would then go between agenda approval and the president's report. Patron comments occur then right after the superintendent's report, with the board commentary immediately following patron comments. The idea behind that is then board members can respond to comments that patrons make shortly after they are actually made, and then also have the, this is kind of in flux, we'll see how it goes, but also have the opportunity to engage with patrons who made a specific comment at the time if the board member would like to call that patron back up, to get some more information if they would like. I'd like my thoughts at this point, we'll see how it goes, is that discussion among board members relative to comments would occur during the board commentary immediately afterwards. And then we've also extended the speaking time from 3 to 5 minutes, but we're not planning to cut anybody off immediately at the 5-minute mark. Also, during patron comments, every meeting, I think it'll be my intent at this point to read the statement about the guidance we would like patrons to follow while making comments, that statement that's on the back of the forms that you fill out, just so that everybody's clear every time. And part of that is that there's an importance of not naming specific names when people make comments relative to incidences or issues that they have or too many details. And it's not just that we're worried about lawsuits. We really worried about protecting due process for teachers, and that anonymity is important to maintain that due process that teachers feel protected from that standpoint. So we'll see how it works out, and we'll make modifications as needed moving forward. And it's still open to evolve, depending on feedback from board members and community members. So I don't know if anybody has any comments right now, or if you want to process it a little bit and bring it up during board commentary, but does anybody have any thoughts they'd like to share?
I like the idea. I think it makes the meeting a little bit more natural, and I've always felt it was a little uncomfortable listening to people tell us something and then just sort of acknowledge them with nods. So thanks for addressing it. I think it was well thought out.
Thanks. Okay, so we'll see how it goes. We'll try it tonight. And then one other point that I just wanted to make real quick, just to make sure that all the board members are clear. I think everybody is, but I'll just reiterate it. I mean, if you have things that you want to bring up from an agenda standpoint, or so that, you always can reach out to Shannon and me, and then we'll talk about that during agenda setting. So just to be clear, okay. All right, that's all I have. So Kyle, I think you're next.
This is American Education Week, national observance to build awareness of the importance of public education. I'll be sharing a video message with staff this week, actually taped that today, because I want them to know that what we do day in and day out and what they do day in and day out to support all kids is very much appreciated. At the beginning of the school year, I told staff that those with the most hope have the most influence. I want to publicly thank our teachers and staff for continuing to have hope that their work with students to make a difference in their lives and the lives of the families and to strengthen our community. I appreciate that our teachers and staff exercise their influence in positive ways to support student achievement and success every day. Their work with kids gives me hope that young people we are influencing and educating today will create a better future, one in which we show greater appreciation for each other, our differences, and the values we share. As part of American Education Week, we will celebrate school volunteerism by honoring some of our outstanding volunteers from across the district. These moms, dads, grandparents, and community partners support our teachers and staff in a variety of ways and model for our students the importance of education and public service. The board and the public are invited to join us for the Friends of Education Recognition reception, which begins at 4 o'clock Wednesday at Southwest Middle School Auditorium. The district will also join the LEA and the Lawrence Schools Foundation in sponsoring an all-staff appreciation mixer on Friday. And that begins at 4:30, I believe. Speaking of volunteers, thank you to the hundreds of volunteers and community partners who worked with our 7th graders last week at the College and Career Center to share networking skills and information about their career paths that were part of a Your Career Connection learning activity. My son actually participated in that and very much enjoyed it. This is also National School Psychology Week, so I want to acknowledge the caring and dedication of our school psychologists out there. They're very important a very important part, an integral part of our school mental health teams, and we sincerely appreciate the work that they do. The National AVID Center has upgraded Lawrence High School to a highly certified AVID site, and that's a big deal. Congratulations to LHS staff for demonstrating that all AVID essentials are consistently applied to facilitate learning for our students. A couple other congratulations here to Free State High School girls cross country team for winning the 6A state championship here a couple weeks ago. Also, Lawrence Virtual School senior Fletcher Scott was named the United States Tennis Association's Heart of America Junior Player of the Year. Finally, I have an award to present here, certificate to present to Shannon Kimball tonight for earning honor roll status by attending the Kansas Association of School Boards Leadership Academy training. So, thank you, Shannon. That's all I have.
Thanks, Kyle. Okay, so we'll move on to patron comments, and then I'm going to go ahead and read the audience participation guidelines on the back. Okay. And as I'm looking at it, I realize we probably need to reword some of this, but the USD 497 Board of Education appreciates patrons taking time to talk to us about our policies and procedures. We set aside this time during every meeting to hear from the public. This is your time to share your opinions. We used to say that we were limiting discussion with the board, but we can have a little bit of back and forth here with primary discussion among board members occurring during the board commentary following. It's not a time for patrons to make comments of a personal nature about any district employee or student. We especially request that you remain positive and respectful when speaking and or listening to the extent that you're able. And then a board member, the superintendent, or another staff member may be in touch with you to refer any specific concerns you might have to the appropriate administrator for investigation. Thank you for sharing your thoughts about policies and procedures with the board. So first individual that we have is Matthew Goff. Did I say that correctly? You did. Okay.
Good evening, President Harmon. I'm here to speak on a matter that's before you on the consent agenda. I'm pleased to address it now, but if it be your preference for me to speak later, I'll do that as well.
Sorry. Anybody? It's the NRA. If anybody has any desire to pull that. No? Yeah. So you can go ahead and comment now.
Okay. Good evening. I'm Matt Goff with Barber Emerson Law Firm. I'm here today on behalf of Williams Management. I'm joined by Adam Williams, who's the owner of Williams Management. And Williams Management is requesting an 85% NRA tax rebate. It is to rehabilitate a vacant, underutilized structure in a very important part of East Lawrence, known as the 8th and Pennsylvania Redevelopment Zone. School board, like the city and like the county, has supported development in that zone in the past by approving NRA tax rebates of 85% or higher for the Cider Gallery and the 9 Dell Lofts. The building is a brick, empty rectangle that was built around 1905. Its uses transitioned from manufacturing to warehousing to empty, and somewhere in the process it lost the top 2 floors. This project will put the top 2 floors back on, and in the process create a vibrant restaurant and brewery and 14 new multifamily apartments. 2 of those apartments will be affordable housing, set aside for affordable housing for 30 years. It's a historic rehabilitation pursuant to the guidelines for the 8th and Pennsylvania Redevelopment Zone. It meets all state and local requirements for the formation of an NRA. It creates jobs, 7 full-time to start and up to 11 over 10 years, and has approximately 37 part-time employees. The City Commission permitted the staff to consider a rebate over 50% on the condition that we hire an outside consultant. His name's Tom Jackson at NDC. And after months of information exchanges and communications, the result of that consultant's report is that a request for an 85% abatement is reasonable because at that level of support, it's still not quite getting to the amount of internal rate of return that would be considered reasonable for a project with this type of a risk profile. The city's own cost-benefit analysis concluded that there would be a net benefit to all of the taxing jurisdictions, and your staff report has indicated that it would have a, quote, very little impact, end quote, on the district's revenue. Now, on November 1st, the City Commission approved a 50% tax rebate, and the request before you is for 85%. The reason why the applicant requested 85% in the first place is because the gap analysis that was done by the outside consultant and the cost-benefit analysis, which was performed by the city staff, supported it. It was a very difficult decision to go with 50% from the county for several reasons. The report, the gap analysis that the outside consultant did, made some assumptions that we would consider to be best-case scenario type assumptions. Most particularly being the amount of rent that the apartments will generate. So we have a best-case analysis, and even at 85% participation from all 3 taxing jurisdictions, the internal rate of return for the project doesn't hit that 10% rate, which is deemed to be the minimum needed to be reasonable for a project at this location with this type of risk. And every time there's an approval that's backing away from 85%, the rate of return gets a little lower. We get a little bit farther away from where the report said we should be. And we believe that the city, the county, and the school district and East Lawrence would be better off if the project thrived, not just survived. So you have before you an opportunity to support the project at 85%. And it would be consistent with what Mayor Amix and Commissioner Boley would have supported. And we hope and we believe that this type of an infill project that is it's in a historically significant part of town, it adds jobs, it creates affordable housing, and it demonstrates a need for that level of support. We believe it merits your consideration at 85%. And in the alternative, if you're unable to support 85% because this board's policy is to follow the city commission, if you could at least acknowledge that you would support it at 85 if the city commission did so as well, that would be helpful. I'll stand for questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Next person that we have is Andy Briggs.
Hi, I'm Andy Bricker. I teach at Lawrence High School. I'm here tonight to talk about equity. I heard mention of AVID earlier. AVID's an excellent program that we do at our school. I heard that our school has become AVID certified or nationally AVID certified. AVID's an excellent program that the district's endorsed, as is CI3T and as is personalized learning. And what those are supposed to do, as I understand it, is work in conjunction with equity to reach our goals of closing achievement gaps, as it's stated in your letter, closing achievement gaps while also raising the achievement of all students. And I believe that equity is, right now, it's the weakest link in that chain for this district. It's the piece that's missing. I've seen strong administrator support for AVID and CI3T and personalized learning at all the buildings. And what I'm not seeing still is the buy-in on the actual equity action. And what I wanted to talk first about beyond diversity. I read the letter that was presented at the last board meeting, and one of the sentences is, the board intends for all USD 497 employees to participate in beyond diversity. And that word intends stuck out to me. I hope that means that all district employees will be required to attend 2-day beyond diversity, back-to-back days, not split up, and that'll be mandatory. And the reason I know that the back-to-back days is critically important is because I asked Danica Moore, our equity TOSA, and I believe her. That's her job, and one of the conditions is to seek out the perspectives of the people that know, and she's the one that knows. And so dividing those up is not acceptable. The back-to-back beyond diversity is imperative, and that's just a starting line. That is just the bare minimum starting line, and that's so we have teachers, we have veteran teachers who still haven't gone. And on behalf of the community, one thing I would like to ask for right now is for the district to produce a list, a public list of teachers that haven't been to Beyond Diversity and why. That is one thing that the community would like to see. And maybe the reason is it's a brand new teacher, but I know we've had new teacher orientations already. So what are the reasons for some of the other teachers, especially veterans who've been around for years? And I can tell you personally from experience doing the equity work in the buildings, it's problematic to have people that haven't gone. Very often, I believe the very reasons those people haven't been sent are the reasons that they needed to go probably more than anybody. Or no, I shouldn't say more than anybody. Every teacher needs to go. I learned, that's where I had my best introduction to white privilege and history that I've never learned, and a full introduction to institutional racism. And I would expect, on behalf of the community, in this other letter, you talked about the importance of Beyond Diversity and the equity goals that the board supports. I would hope and expect that each board member would also go to the 2-day back-to-back Beyond Diversity. I feel that that's imperative. I could be wrong, and I hope I am, but I was told that one board member, Mr. Ingram, had refused to go. I don't know if that's true.
That is not true.
Okay, have you been?
I've been to some of them.
Okay, the 2-day back-to-back Beyond
I went
Diversity.
to the back, but it conflicted with my job. So that was the reason for it.
Okay. Well, like I said, I talked to Danica Moore. That's who I sought out. And she said 2 days back-to-back was imperative. But okay, thank you for that.
No, but if I could, since you signaled me out, you know, we do have these scheduled. I'm trying to figure out a way that I can make them. But to say that I refuse to go, I think is just inaccurate.
Well, I'll be clear. She didn't say that. And I said that that's what I've heard. That is what I've
I don't
heard.
know where you're hearing it from, but that's just not true.
Okay. So let me reiterate, though, my request for a list of district employees who haven't gone. And then after Beyond Diversity, what's critical, if Beyond Diversity is the starting line, these teachers must come back to a building that has a strong equity team and equity environment. And teachers have reached out to me from other schools and told me that they believe that is not the case at every school in this district. And that's where I think administrator accountability is essential. And I think that piece has been lacking. I know that piece has been lacking. There's a condition that says isolate race as part of the protocol. It doesn't mean that race is the only thing we talk about in equity or in Beyond Diversity, but it means that race is the thing that people are most uncomfortable talking about. It's the one that people refuse. And I rarely hear communication about racial disparities in our school, in our curriculum, in our success. I rarely hear those from administrators. And I do hear about AVID, I hear about CI3T, I hear about personalized learning. I get other emails and well-worded objectives about other things other than race, but what I'm not hearing is a fundamental philosophy on race or direct ideas and actions that we should take regarding the disparities in our school. And we still have, in our curriculum, we still have an underrepresentation of students of color in our advanced classes and in our advanced placement classes. Has been going on for years. I brought it up after my first Beyond Diversity, and we started seeing the data. That was about 8 years ago. And that disparity still exists. In gifted education, the disparity is even larger. The gifted education program in this district is almost exclusively white, and I've brought that up. I know it's not an easy thing to fix, but some of the things that have been told to me by teachers and administrators at various levels are gifted's not that important anyway, or there's just nothing that can be done about it, or even maybe it's the white students that are the gifted ones. So when these things happen, when these things are intimated, I know there's an environment where that type of thing is allowed to be said. And I think there are, I think the best way to address that first would be some administrative philosophies articulated strongly. It could be as direct as, in this district, we don't subscribe to the idea that white people are superior to others, because that idea has been spoken. And I'm not talking about at a specific school. I'm talking about multiple times at multiple schools. That idea has been articulated. So for the superintendent, for instance, or building principals, to articulate that clearly, that we don't believe that idea that white people are superior. I think it's essential, maybe now more than ever, because that is happening. That idea is out there in our district among teachers. And it's not just race, other intersectionalities, meaning people with marginalized identities that it doesn't necessarily include race, like our queer and trans students, are still microaggressed in our school environments, sometimes by teachers. For instance, misgendering someone or using the wrong pronouns, not just accidentally, but sometimes jokingly or intentionally. And these are things that can also be, I believe, this environment can be fixed through strong administrative, objective statements saying we will respect people's preferred pronouns. We will do that. We will do our best to respect that. So this is some of the type of maybe it's uncomfortable leadership that I just haven't seen in the district. And I'm not just talking about the school that I work at. Other teachers have reached out to me as well. So I know we have one of the board goals has to do with training on microaggressions, and I think that is just critical right now. For our district needs that training on microaggressions, and I saw it on the board goals. Please follow through that. I know that Danica Moore, I've been to one of her presentations on microaggressions. I learned a great deal, but these microaggressions are real and they happen to our queer and trans students, our black and brown students, our undocumented immigrant students, our indigenous students, and I don't see administrators or even other teachers a lot of times wanting to jump and move and fix that. So I think that microaggression training is going to be critical. And finally, I want to point out one last thing. I know that our graduation rates we get shown the graphic a lot, that the graduation rates between our white students and our black students is closing. The line's closing, but the graduation rate's still lower for the black students. And I want to point out that closing of the gap, while it is exemplary of hard work on our part, that is not an equity success. It's a product of hard work, but that's largely fueled by winter night school, summer school, credit recovery. It doesn't represent an influx of culturally relevant teaching. It doesn't represent access to advanced curriculum. It doesn't necessarily represent college and career readiness, but it reflects getting the credits to graduate. So I see that one a lot, and I just want to call it what it is right now because we have equity work to do, and I think that needs to be pointed out. So I appreciate you letting me speak. I do want to say one more time, intersectionality matters, and it's critically important. I'm talking about like I said earlier, our undocumented students, our queer and trans students, our black students, Latinx students. It's not just race when we talk about equity. Equity means everything, and it means all the students need access to everything. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Andy. So let's move into board commentary, and we can actually discuss some of these issues here. Vanessa, you actually have something that may be related to this.
Yeah, I do. And it's prepared ahead of time, and thank you for your information. I'm going to try and weave in a response to that as well. But so last week, a man who made countless horrific and offensive comments about African Americans, Muslims, Mexicans, and women was elected to the highest office in our country. And I think in all the awfulness, the knowledge and news of everything that is so wrong in this world is real and present. And I think it's easy for people to get caught up in all of that and get overwhelmed by it. Systemic racism is huge, and it's a pervasive problem, and it's woven into the very fabric of our society, along with sexism and rape culture, which permeates much of our world. And at this moment, I think it's critical that we take stock and think about what we can do as a school board and as a school district to provide as much of a buffer as we can for our students against things that are real and happening and things that may be to come. And so our district's focus on equity, which is rooted in a very real commitment to ongoing direct actions and goals, is certainly hopeful and encouraging, and it's obvious we have a lot of work yet to do. But I believe that that work is combating systemic oppressive systems that have existed for much of time. And I believe that it's the right road to be on. It's just a matter of not being far enough along the road to celebrate that we're there. We're definitely not at the finish line. And as a school board member, it's concerning and a call to action for me to hear examples of all of the ways that our district isn't meeting the needs of all of our students and families. And in light of this, it's clear we have more work to do. But I do believe that there's a lot of passion and commitment, and I'm very encouraged and thankful for the work of many dedicated professionals, the teachers, the counselors, the administrators, superintendents, fellow board members, that are doubling down their efforts to make sure that our students feel safe at school, with special attention and focus on minority students, those whose race, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, religion are different or less prevalent. But I think it's super important that as budgets get tighter, we continue to remind ourselves that priorities are not what we say, but are rather defined by what we do and where we put our limited resources and the finite amount of focus that we have. And our equity work will require and deserve significant resources in the coming years. I was also struck this week by a campaign that the Lawrence Public Library put together to highlight their commitment to being a safe space for everybody, and I printed it. If you want to, actually, let me have one of those. It was through kind of social media. They put together a post about being a safe place for everybody for real. Highlighting to all community members and patrons that we want you to feel safe here. If you don't, speak up and tell someone offensive, threatening, harassing, or abusive language or gestures are not allowed in the library or on library grounds, and kind of go on to describe their policies. And I think our district has benefited from having strong anti-discrimination and anti-harassment policies for a long time. We added gender identity, sexual orientation long before it was typical to see that kind of language. But I think for a sixth grader or a ninth grader or, just a student, they may not know. They're far removed from that policy, and it really happens to be like what the practice is, whether or not someone speaks up, whether or not people take it seriously, whether or not a complaint is seen as being really important. And I think that, what the library is doing in highlighting or really marketing their policies is powerful, because you have to be aware and know what to do when comments are made or when violence occurs or when someone is fearful for their safety. And so I think it might be really wise as a district to consider how we can engage in a similar campaign, and even, make it age appropriate. It might look different at the elementary school level, what a poster might look like and who a student's supposed to report something to if they experience hateful speech or, discrimination or bullying. But, so the challenge before us is large. We live at a divisive time. Despite this, it's imperative that we create environments where our students feel safe to be who they are. And I just want to let the community know that I'm here to listen anytime, that a student or family or staff member has a concern or a suggestion where we're getting it wrong or we're getting it right, or if they have an idea for how I can push forward better policies or programs or campaigns, but that I am committed to pushing for progress, and hope all of you are as well.
Thanks, Vanessa. Yeah, go ahead, Jessica.
Thank you, Vanessa. That was really great. And I agree that the library campaign is wonderful, and I'd love to see us do better at making sure people know exactly where they should be going if they have issues. I want to address a couple things, Andy, that you said. One is, asking that administrators make a really clear statement that they don't think that whites are superior to people of color or anybody else for that matter. And I think that that's something that can clearly be done. I know that even at KU, we're getting much better about that with some of the new leaders that we have there, sending out constant messages of reassurance that this is a safe space and with information on where to report things and things like that. I don't really see any reason why the school district can't follow that lead. But also, as a board member, I'd like to say that I certainly do not believe that whites are superior to people of color or anybody else with intersectionalities of transgender or any other things. So I personally will give you that statement. And I also wanted to thank you personally, Andy, because I know that you have worked really hard to provide a safe space at Lawrence High for kids and are doing a lot of good work. And I know it's tiring, and so it doesn't go unnoticed, and it's appreciated.
Shannon. Vanessa, relative to the Lawrence Public Library thing, I'm wondering if might be worth seeing what buildings are doing, if any buildings are doing anything now, if certain buildings are doing or teachers are doing something that's on the similar lines of this, they've already looked at what's age appropriate or
Right.
so it might be that we could use to build on.
And I'm familiar. I know that like all the schools are engaged in anti-bullying programs. I mean, we're required to by the state law, and I think it's up to districts what to do. And I think maybe it's been up to buildings which programs to use. I forget. I think it's gone back and forth a little bit. And so I'm sure some of that is in there. But I think that might be different necessarily than some of the discrimination and harassment that may be, I don't know, larger or more pervasive in our community than that. And
I think I like the idea that it's a unified message. I know probably each building has work. I wouldn't want to usurp the work that they've done, but it would be nice if we had a unified message. And I think you've brought up a couple times that people have said, where do I go? Who do I talk to? And this sort of very simply relays the message and the information of who to go to for a safe place. So,
yeah, I think the simplicity of it allows it to speak loudly and broadly.
But the teachers won't listen if they're not doing the work.
Beyond diversity is a requirement, right?
Yes, it is. So I would go back even several years that I remember Dr. Dole had made that statement very clearly. We have not deterred from that statement. It was in our board goals last year. Every staff member would go through Beyond Diversity. All of our new teachers go through it. There are some that may not have went through in October because they'd been pulled out of the classroom about a half a dozen times in the first 2 months. So we waited till the second session, which will be in November, actually within the next couple weeks, if not sooner. Every building knows who has not gone through it. We have a list of those people. We are about 75% through district-wide. By the end of the year, I bet we will be close to 90, 95%. Some buildings will be either are complete now or will be very close by the end of the year. So that's a purposeful part of every school improvement plan that the principals give to me and our superintendent's leadership team, so I know that information.
Rick, did you have something?
No, I was going to ask that question. Kind of where we are with that. You can, I guess, differ on what the word intent means, but my understanding was everybody will go through it. So you answer that.
Yeah. Question's been asked. Can it be made public? Is that something the board decides? Is there legal issues?
I'd have to look into that before I respond.
I understand the transparency part of it and the how that can motivate behavior change. I have I guess my initial reaction is I personally have some concerns in terms of what that may. Some teachers, there may be some reasons from on an individual standpoint based on why they haven't done it or are planning to do it in a couple of months or so. I think Kyle's right. We probably need to discuss that a little bit more before we decide to make that public.
We have to sign our name in to speak, and it's relayed to the public. If anybody could just come and grab one of these things and see our names as parents, as teachers, and you learn about the privacy of the teachers. When our privacy is being exposed. So should we not have to sign those papers and not put it so that it's not on that big packet?
You don't have to sign when you come in. We'd prefer in case if you brought up an issue so that we could contact you. But no, you don't have to sign. There's no requirement that you sign. There is one additional individual that has asked to make a statement. Andrew Nussbaum? Nussbaum, sorry.
Andrew Nussbaum. I am an educator. I was an educator. I'll wait. Thank you. Andrew Nussbaum. I am an educator, and I was an educator here in Lawrence School District from 2006 to 2013. As an educator, and one that deeply cares about history and sociology and social justice and real-life people, I also understand that language and narrative matters. The language and the narrative that we use can cover up actually what we're really doing. For example, as a history teacher, it used to be called the Secretary of War, but we learned that made us feel uncomfortable, and there's peace activists wanting to get rid of weapons, so we changed it to the Secretary of Defense. Wow, now we're in self-defense, like we're the good people. We're not a U.S. empire doing imperialism. So let's talk about some of the language we have in our school district, because these letters are really, really long. We like to say a lot of words. For me, it's important to make sure the words we are using not only are followed up with action, but the words themselves aren't covering up or being complicit or perpetuating the harm that is actually happening. We say the Lawrence Board of Education's excellence, equity, and engagement goals serve to raise the achievement of all students while closing achievement gaps. That, by definition, at least in my perspective, is focusing on a deficit mindset instead of a systems process. So, for example, I would much rather that, at least at the ending, say, or instead of achievement gaps, and other school districts have changed this language, opportunity gaps, access gaps, ownership gaps, resources gaps. My perspective, in a complex adaptive system like school districts are, like institutions are, nested in a larger society, like you now acknowledged, that is possibly an entry point that if we even use a different word, we will see that word and it will force us, I hope, to look at the questions and ask different questions. Instead of saying achievement gap, look at that kid, he's just not achieving. Those 3 kids, they're not achieving. What can they do better? What can we work on them? Let's put them in Avid. Summer school. If we look at opportunity gap, that is the number one factor, opportunity, access, ownership, and where people live in terms of where the schools are relative to resources. That is why the gaps are there. Not because somebody is achieving at a lower level, because they don't have the same opportunity, access, ownership, and resources. Other school districts in Seattle, in Washington, D.C., in Chicago, in Minneapolis, in St. Paul, they have changed the word to opportunity gaps. Something to think about, a pretty simple entry point into being able to ask different questions when we are even defining our Lawrence Board of School goals. Also, on your letter, Kyle, you said, Finally, I want to express my own personal commitment to this work. Equity is a fundamental value of mine. And then you said, I believe all children, regardless of race, color, religion, sex, age, national origin, disability, background, socioeconomic status, sexual orientation, or gender identity, deserve a high-quality education. I appreciate you having that fundamental value, but equity isn't a value. Equity isn't a belief. Equity is an action. Equity is acknowledging and acting and redistributing access and ownership of resources, capital, and decision-making within systems. So I appreciate you stating that, but that's a lot of words, a long sentence. But equity is about acknowledging and acting and actually redistributing resources, access, and ownership, and decision-making power. So I appreciate how you have shifted listening to people's in community, how the school board is running, and yet please note that at the end of that commentary that you made sure to, again, control it by saying, make sure you use positive language, make sure you're positive, make sure you're this and that again toned and went very quickly again into making sure we still are the ones that have power and control. Decision-making is a part of equity. So again, our language matters. Think about opportunity gap, ownership, access gap, and really questioning what you mean by fundamental value when we define what equity is. Thank you.
Thank you. Good point about the wording on the audience participation. I do acknowledge that we need to work on that.
So, I forgot your name. Vanessa, you said that there were anti-discrimination policies already in place, yet there are still some people that are discriminating, some of which are leaders. Children have already spoken on these issues, and nothing's being done. So the question is, when are we going to go through with it, that it is not tolerated? The end of the year is fast approaching, and you said by the end of the year, we're trying to get, 95% of staff in beyond diversity. We have 16 days left, about 3 or 4 days of Thanksgiving break, winter break. How is that going to be done? Again, going back to what Vanessa said about the recent election with the president-elect, that has stirred up some things. Something needs to be done before that office, before he swears in. Something needs to be done in this school so that these students will feel safe. I wrote a few things I had to modify. Going back to that, like Andy Bricker said, is not something that's going on in just one school. It's going on in multiple schools. Some of them are getting a little bit of light shed on them, and right now we don't know what's going to happen, what consequences are going to derive from that, from those situations, and people are just being told to shush, hush, and what that's doing, again, with those anti-discrimination policies already in place, students already reaching out and speaking. What you're doing is I feel the district is doing is that we're not teaching our children of color, that intersectionalities, that their voices don't matter when it comes to their worth, when it comes to our worth, our dreams. We're teaching white students that it's okay to call us out of our name because staff has already done it. Leaders that they're supposed to look up to, that they're being taught from, are doing it. You're confusing the white children whose parents are teaching them otherwise. That is not okay. How long will we allow this to happen? Okay. Sometimes we think, okay, they're exposed, they're going to learn their lesson, and they don't. They'll do it again. Maybe they'll sit on their hands and stay quiet for a little while, but then something else will come up and they'll mention it again. So I hope, it is my sincere hope that by January, we have this long break, that something is done, that these these veteran teachers that, for whatever reason, haven't been able to attend Beyond Diversity, that they do. I know there's no way in the world, if I'm, as a teacher, if I have a group of students that I know nothing about and I cannot identify with them, there's no way in the world that I'm going to miss out on this. I'm going to make a plan. If it takes me a day's pay and I need to, if I need to pay for child care or anything like that, I'm going to make sure I attend so that I can reach all of my students. Okay. Then again, with the generational gap, the opportunity gap, we have some educators now that are not even given immediate feedback. I know that was one thing that, as a teacher, when you are given assignments, given lessons, or et cetera, that you are supposed to give immediate feedback. There's Skyward. There are times where I can go on Skyward and there's nothing on there for 3 and 4 weeks at a time. Perhaps if that issue was addressed, these students will know where they're at, you know. So that's another thing to take into consideration, giving that immediate feedback, not just saying, okay, you have a D, you have an F, you have a C, but this is what you can do to get it up to achieve more. Don't just assume that they're doing minimum work or this is the best that they can do. So I think those are the few things that I had to say. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. And one other, Michael Mimar, Michelle?
Deja McCabe Maher. I'm just going to go ahead and go first. I didn't sign
Okay.
up. I get really kind of up in my head and my emotions, and I want to make sure that I say all the right things and don't say any of the wrong things, and I want to make sure I'm totally understood, so I want to cover all my bases. I have learned more in the past year, in the last 6 months, about race and equity and human interaction and than I have my entire life. In school, from my family, we're all different. We all have different experiences. We all get different messages from the world in our relationship. The one thing I've learned is there's not going to be that in line. I'm not going to say all the right things. In fact, just when I think I've got something figured out, I read something or I hear another conversation that I go, holy, fill in the blank with your cuss word of choice. I do that. I've done that. I did that last week. Oh my God, who do I need to apologize for? How do I explain this and rationalize it? We don't have to. This work is hard, it's honest, and it makes people uncomfortable. They don't want to be right. They don't want to be responsible for any of the wrongs that happened today or hundreds of years ago. And that's not how we can look at it. I've been in these spaces more recently, but I have been in the past as well. You get up here, you have your process, you get the timer notification, and it's been told time and time again that we don't talk back. And I understand we're breaking some of that down here because we've got some new stuff going on. But I just want to acknowledge what I saw because I've done it. And I've seen so many other people do it. When we're trying to talk about things honestly, and things that we know, and things that aren't being heard, there's this need. I felt, from my perspective, when you reacted about not going, that you wanted to correct that right away. Like there was that. And that's, I mean, I get it. I understand it. I see it. I've been that way. And now I know different. I've seen so many different ways that I could have handled situations, like well, there were reasons at the time. You don't even need to say that, like, I'll find out when I can do it next, see if we can make it happen, see if the, people giving the training can make some sort of special accommodation for your work schedules, whatever. It doesn't have to be like that. It's not a condemnation, And as far as requesting the list of who and who hasn't, I understand, as a white person growing up around mostly white people, I understand we got to check into some things, meaning we got to respect other people's feelings and freedom of speech and religious observations. I get all that. But as a parent of 3 boys in this district, I want to know who's refusing to take it. You don't have to tell me why. But if somebody doesn't want to take it, that's fine. They can own that. That's their conviction. That's their belief. They don't like sitting through long, boring trainings. That's fine. But I want to know if there's going to be teachers who are people who grew up in the same towns with the same families and the same, liberal or conservative or, whatever, the same dynamics. I want to know if they're going to communicate directly to our kids what's acceptable and what's not, as far as cultural bias, as far as slut shaming, rape culture. All of that has to change. And safe spaces. I am so mad. I cannot stand it. People joke about it. They don't understand it. They try to make it about free speech. The reason you don't like it is because you're uncomfortable. You're uncomfortable because people are unsafe. And you're trying to form that. People are trying, not you, I'm talking about people, okay? Anybody that watches any news or is on any social media understand that, okay? They want to silence talking about race, about homophobia, about discrimination, about income disparities, criminal justice issues, all of it, because that means something's not working, someone or some institution has gotten it wrong, and they've got to fix it. People don't like it. It makes them uncomfortable. And I've gotten lazy because I have rolled my eyes and said, oh, that's just so-and-so. That's just his form of humor. He's never going to change. My grandpa's too old to have this conversation. We have gotten lazy. And I need to be able to articulate why people that do not feel safe, why it's okay to stand up and say, hey, I will make sure that you are not verbally or physically harassed one time, because we all know somebody who has something that sticks way down in their gut and way down in their soul for the rest of their lives. And it affects how they see the world. It affects how they treat people. And the reason everybody wants to say, love everyone, respect everyone, and come together is because they're sick of hearing it, because it makes them angry, it makes them stressed out, and it makes them uncomfortable. And if any part of what I'm saying resonates with y'all on some level, and you have any questions, I am willing to talk more at length about this. Because it's not going to change unless we're willing to be uncomfortable and know that someone that does not feel safe one time or in one class for 1 year or all throughout school, all throughout their lives, are feeling this stress. And it may not express itself like I am with my tone and my enthusiasm. It may result in them shutting down and ignoring things and accepting things that are not okay. That are not okay. And I'm sorry if that makes you uncomfortable, but we got to deal with it.
Thank you. Michael, are you Michael?
Yes.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Michael Maher. I just wanted to make two recommendations. The first, kind of leading off, and I'm sorry I didn't get your name, but what she was speaking, the teacher was speaking about. I know elections are supposed to be private and whatnot, but and Vanessa, you said this, we did elect an outwardly spoken racist, homophobe, xenophobe, misogynistic candidate. And guess what? Our students know that, right? And so, and I just want to tell you really quick, I had one of the students that I work with in the schools came up to his teacher and said, see this? This is why white people hate me, because of my skin color. And then he cried most of last Wednesday, okay? So, and it's a first grader. So I think there needs to be a district-wide response. And sorry if some of the teachers voted for Trump, right? It needs to be addressed because our students are suffering, okay? And one of the schools that I work in has a very large Muslim population, and I know there's a lot of fear, okay? The other recommendation that I would like to make specifically to you, Kyle, and you talked about making a video earlier today, and I know I've had to see videos from our past superintendent that were mandatory for all district staff, and kind of going off of what Andy had brought up earlier, there are, unfortunately, teachers who do believe that white people are smarter than people of color. There have been emails sent out with articles from teachers that say, hey, look at this study that says white people are smarter than black people. Okay? That's happening. I would like to ask you, Kyle, to make a video that states that we do not believe that. And anybody who even espouses that in any way will be up for discipline. Okay, because, and unfortunately, they shouldn't be teaching. We should be getting rid of them now because unconsciously they're affecting all those kids of color that are in their classes in a negative fashion. So I would ask you to maybe make a video stating that this is not a district policy. Our district policy is that everyone is equal. Okay? That's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you. Didn't we last week have some type of response for? Did we send support staff out, or they were available for employees, the students?
Yes. Yeah. We made support staff available in our schools. So yeah, our building administration was aware, made that known, and they were there. But yeah, to answer that.
Huh? I can go?
Sure.
Sure. It's pretty thick in here today. And I'll tell you, I think it's pretty thick because we don't actually like talking about things that make us uncomfortable, and I'm done with that stuff. There are multiple people, I would say thousands and thousands of people that died on Tuesday. Now, there's more than one way to die, right? As we know, there's more than just physical life. There's emotional, spiritual, all these things, right? That's what we know about dying. There are people that died on Tuesday evening, Wednesday morning. And we are talking about whether there'll be possibilities. I'm tired of this classism. I'm tired of it. There are people that don't look like you. Again, I'm tired of telling you that every time I come here. And I'm tired of hearing the same things reiterated by y'all that we said at the meeting we were at last time. When we talk about all these isms and cultures and things like that, we said these. And also, I love Andy Bricker, and he does a hell of a lot of work. But there are black and brown and indigenous people and queer and trans folk and non-binary folks that do a hell of a lot of work here in the school district too, and they don't hear nothing. That's institutional racism. That is institutional transphobia and heteronormativity, right? Because we are to acknowledge the people that are doing the work. Now, you send support staff in, but do those support staff look like the people that are hurting? Because I'll tell you what, I probably won't talk to any of you about what I'm going through or what I felt on Tuesday. I don't care how well-intentioned you are, right? Because representation matters. And as we come into a space where we know we're not welcome, where you all waive the time limit because we don't adhere to that anyways, because we got something to say that doesn't need to be censored and that needs to be heard. When we come into a space like this, we know that we're under attack. And we know it doesn't matter what you proclaim, because we elected Donald Trump on Tuesday, y'all. I don't know, maybe it was a dream to me. But I tell you what, a lot of queer and trans folk know it's not a dream. And my neighbors had 3 people that went and got married 2 days after that because they don't know if they're going to survive through it, right? Or whether they're going to be able to do that. Now, as we sit here and we have blank expressions, one thing that you all should know is that black and brown folks are under attack. Indigenous folks have been under attack since y'all got here, right? That's what we know. So stop taking over our spaces and telling us that our oppression doesn't matter enough to act. Because that's what it is. Now, we can make proclamations all day, but I'll tell you what, the people on KU's campus that are doing something are black and brown and indigenous or international, right? Let that be known. Also, Black Lives Matter have people all day escorting people around to their classes. Did you have anybody in the school districts that were escorting your students that were under attack? Because if you think KU's the only place where this stuff is happening, you're incorrect. You think that people just grow up and go to college to become good racists or xenophobes or Islamophobics? No. This stuff starts in elementary schools, in preschools, because it's not stopped by people that are like y'all, right? Because we have to recognize power dynamics and how racism works. It don't matter at all if I come in here and tell y'all that what you're doing is wrong, that not going to a training is wrong, that not doing enough is wrong, because I can't do a damn thing to y'all, because I'm black. I can't do anything to y'all. I can't blacklist you. I can't do anything like that, because I recognize power, but y'all seem to not recognize power. And these people that come in day after day and come in and tell you the things that they know to be true because they experience it, and y'all still got an open investigation. That's not equity, and that is not justice. My children will not live in a place where this happens, because I'll tell you what, if I told some white kids and I was a teacher that black people are smarter than them, that y'all stole land from indigenous folks and black folks, I would be fired immediately. And if we can't talk about that, then we're not really here for the discussion. So your letters don't mean anything. Your signature doesn't mean anything, right? Because this stuff is real to us, because we live it. Because we're under attack, because we receive death threats for doing nothing other than being alive. Death threats. You should know that as a superintendent. You should know that your students, your people here, receive death threats and are told that they ain't shit in school. They are not shit in school by their classmates, and it's perpetuated by their teachers and the staff not doing anything. That is unacceptable. And you should know that. And so if you feel this rage, you have not seen anything, because you don't know what it's like to be almost dead. You don't know what it's like to just be waiting for that moment where you are powerless, right? Sounds a lot like rape culture, right? These isms intersect, where we are powerless to do anything because the dominant understanding is that you just aren't worth it. We're not willing to step out of our comfort, out of those beautifully comfortable chairs, to live a life that looks a little bit like ours. Now, y'all say that you're allies or that you stand in solidarity. No. No. You don't get to choose whether you're in solidarity. We choose whether you are allies. We choose whether you stand in solidarity. We choose that. You don't get to just make a fake request or a fake letter and say that we got you. And then these kids go back to school and they're called all kinds of slurs. Here, Lawrence, Kansas, the next day after the election, a Muslim student was accosted. So what do? Because we are the people that act. Hear it now. Black Lives Matter, LFK, we're the people that act. The community that knows, we're the people that act. We put escorts on the campus. We contacted the deans. We let the teachers know, the administrators, the professors, that we will do what we need to do because these people deserve to be safe. Anything less than that is unacceptable. You have more institutional power behind this damn oval, or whatever the hell is, half moon, than we have ever had coming up to this podium. You don't need to know my name. You need to save my children. There is nothing that will ever be less acceptable than doing nothing while our kids are dying internally. Nothing. There's nothing else to say. I don't care. I don't care what you all say about what you've been trying to do, what you've been doing. Pass something, make it happen, get rid of these teachers that are killing our kids. Because I'll be damned if I just let my kids grow up and go right to the school to prison pipeline. If you don't think it exists here, it sure does. Because I did my clinical internship at the Douglas County Jail. That's a short stop to prison. You are accountable and you are responsible to fix it. You know what you know, and you are doing nothing. Period. Doing nothing. In the schools, you're doing nothing. You're doing nothing. These individuals are the ones that are doing things. And there is nothing that will be less acceptable, again, than our children being harmed actively without any recourse. It's cool, you know, freedom of speech, right? Nah, you're not going to call my kid a nigger. I'll show up every day to class. I'm not going to call them that. Nope. So that starts with addressing the roots, which would be the parents, holding the parents in the community responsible, which would be addressing the children, having a conversation. Now, I know teachers don't got a whole lot of time, but I bet you they have a whole lot of time for their own kids. And it's the teacher's responsibility to serve the whole class, not just the upper class. See what I did there? That's the responsibility. And I know that the people out here in the audience sure do that. And so if you're upset about this, I'm sure sorry. There have been 10 people who have been murdered by the police since the election. Haven't heard anything about that. Multiple trans folks that have been murdered. Multiple Latinx students or people that have been murdered. Multiple black people that have been murdered. Multiple indigenous folks that have been murdered. Consistently accosted by the police up at Standing Rock. People in Flint that are dying from lead poisoning. All over. Just because y'all feel overwhelmed by the realities that we have always lived doesn't mean that it's not your responsibility to delve in. You want power, you serve the people. If you don't, you need to get the hell out because you're harming our kids. And those kids grow up to be some angry adults. So you remember that, because we won't be quiet, because we have the words, because we know it's not okay. Tired of coming back here, and I'm tired of wasting my time. If y'all want to be about it, be about it. But don't you ever put Black Lives Matter up there and then not serve the people that need to be radically prioritized. That is not your right, and that is super disrespectful. We deserve to live, we deserve to survive, and we deserve to thrive. Anything else is unacceptable, period. Because I can tell you, whatever your intersectionalities, I sure would fight for you, and I do it every day. You can check my Facebook. I'm sure some of y'all already creeped on it. So let's talk about what we really are going to do, because if we're just talking around it, you're being cowards.
I think we have one more person that signed up to speak. Is it Joy Myers, sorry.
Hi, my name is Joy. I am a USD 497 employee. I'm a paraeducator for school psychologists, and I go to 7 different schools. So I see a lot of different people, a lot of different circumstances. I hear a lot of different things. Most of it's good, but some of it's not. there are some things I should have spoken up about, and I didn't, and I regret it. Institutional racism, overt racism. I don't want to not speak up about it anymore. I want to make sure that this issue doesn't die out, that the school board takes this seriously, that it doesn't come down to just let's do some trainings, let's make some more posters, let's hand out some brochures, and it'll fix it, because it won't. I mean, all of this, it started with one teacher, but if we're hearing all of this pain, it goes so much deeper than one teacher. This is going to take a lot to deal with, and it's going to take more than just verbiage. And one way that I've seen that is, you guys talk about how it's required to do the diversity training, and I've worked in this district this is my 3rd year. I'm not a long timer or anything, but I've never been invited to the Beyond Diversity training. And I honestly don't know how high paraeducators are up on that list. And paraeducators spend so much time with kids. And honestly, I think we got a fairly disproportionate amount of children who are minorities in special education. And paraeducators are working directly with those kids. And if we can't say, if the Beyond Diversity is important to you, then we need to be making paraeducators a priority. And we need to be getting substitutes so they can go, because the thing that I've heard is that, well, we can't send the paraeducators because we can't get enough substitutes for them. And I'm like, why not? Come on. And it's got to be addressed. It's got to be a school-wide thing. It's got to be all staff. You've got to value everybody. You've got to give everybody a chance to participate and a chance to speak. And I appreciate, I do work at South Middle School a couple days a week, and I do appreciate they've been having some very open conversations, and they have made sure that all staff in the building know of these meetings and come to these meetings. Even the, the food staff. And I think that approach is important. I don't think it should be only at South. I don't think it should be only right now when things are like super high emotional. I think this should carry on, and it shouldn't just be for meetings where we talk about stuff. It needs to be for when we actually do stuff. Something needs to change. Things really seriously need to be examined, because we shouldn't have a disproportionate amount of minority children in special education. We shouldn't be saying, well, that kid should be in sped just because he can't behave in the classroom. It's why can't that kid behave in the classroom? What's wrong? What's going on with the teacher? What's going on at home? What's going on with why we don't have preschool for every child? These are big things, and we need to be honest about them. We need to be aware of them. We need to continue to foster honest discussion, and so I am glad that you've opened this up more. I think it's better. But just speaking as a paraeducator, I think we need to be better at listening to everybody. We need to be listening to everybody who works in the schools. We need to be listening to everybody in the community. We need to look at, race, class, gender, everything. Sexual orientation, we can't afford to keep ignoring things. So I really want the school board and all school administration and everybody to take this seriously, and I want to take it seriously as well, because I don't want this to just dissipate when things calm down. I want things to actually change. So, thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any equity? Any
I just had a
comments?
quick question
Yeah.
about, do paraeducators go through Beyond Diversity?
There have been some that go through, and usually it's driven by the principals and how they manage that. It's true that we have a hard time filling para positions, let alone getting subs for them. So a lot of times it does put us in a pretty tough situation as far as supporting the kids that
Is the
are in
general
need.
plan that is part of that group is one that we want to have go through it?
Yeah, I would say the general plan would be that we have every single staff member that would go through it. Classified staff has been probably the biggest challenge. Number one, because of turnover. Number two, because of trying to get substitutes for those positions. We do have a plan. You would see it in the board goals for classified staff, it's in particular from facilities and operations and for food service this summer to receive training. So that's part of our basically Beyond Diversity plan. So that would be a target of a lot of our classified staff. But paraeducators, little by little, I think you would see that happening in our buildings, but definitely not 100%.
And I want to clarify, when you said by the end of the year we will be up to 95%, that's the end of the school year, not the end of the calendar year. Is that right?
Correct. We have 4 more Beyond Diversities this year. And those sessions are limited, obviously, by numbers. Only so many people you can fit in a room or to make it effective even. We're also limited by subs. Once again, I mean, and the costs associated with those things. So it's a challenge to continue to chip away at that. But we do have a plan.
Do we
and we're executing it.
We do Beyond Diversity in the summer sometimes. Do we open that up to paras? Because generally they're not working in the summer. Is that accurate?
We haven't had a lot of Beyond Diversities in the summer, largely because people aren't interested in participating in those. This summer will be the time that we do, well, it'll either be spring break or summer for our food service facilities and operations staff, because that's really one of the only times we can do those folks effectively, because you can't pull them out for a day of their regular duties. So same challenges exist with paras that I just existed, so that summer target would be a better time. But yeah, some buildings have brought paras to the table, though, for Beyond Diversity, but I'm sure it's not as much as we would want or hope.
So I have a question, might be a dumb question. What exactly is the training that paras have to go through to work in our school district, to work with students?
Okay. Whatever was presented about the classified compensation study, or whatever that dog and pony show was, MANT training, safety training for our paraprofessionals, and I'm probably shooting myself in the foot right now as far as any potential future work in our school district, because we all love the good PR. We don't want to hear what's wrong, and we definitely don't want to hear it out loud. I was hired last year, my first year as a paraeducator. What I was told during the interview process and what I found out the first day I showed up, and definitely the first day kids showed up to the classroom, not even close. Not even close. I was making $3 an hour less than when I left my restaurant job. Did get benefits. That used to be great before we had other options. That used to be why you were able to hire and retain paras. Instead, it's like pulling teeth trying to get the information. Whatever consulting firm we hired to pay a ridiculous amount of money to find out, why can't we hire and retain classified staff? They didn't look at the benefits part of it. And I was told, I was started out at the very bottom of the base pay because I had no direct or work-like experience working with kids with autism, special needs in high school, okay? And that's what I'm locked into. I could not, beyond the annual percentage raise, There was no flexibility there. And what I did in my classrooms and other paras did at different levels, I know it differs between schools and rooms and elementary, middle, and high school. But when I have countless pictures of cuts, bruises, scratches. I got hit on, shit on, spit on, bit on, yelled at, cursed at. I got told, well, what classes would you like to go and take your kids around to, any subjects that you're, more interested in or less? No. I had to fight to get my kids into classes, and certain teachers had to fight to get our kids to participate. And it's not because of the paras, and it's not because of the teachers, and it's not because of the students' desire or ability. For kids, especially a lot of the kids I worked with, having consistency and having trained people who know what they're doing work with them is vital to their well-being, to their human dignity. And just when I got good at what I was doing, I was pretty much shut down. Oh, and by the way, like when I admitted, hey, I don't know what I'm doing. So when I was asked questions, I didn't blow sunshine up people's wahoos, telling them what I thought sounded good. I said, I really don't know. I hope this is going to be covered in some training before I'm working with students. Oh, yeah, of course. No. And this is not just an isolated incident. This is things that I have heard from other paras, from other schools, year after year after year. It is stressful. It is low pay. Really, I was shocked to find out any paras had gone to any of the extra trainings, because if it is, there's a reason. It's because somebody has prioritized it at that school. Somebody thinks that para, they can't get enough people to go, or somebody thinks that they have a strength and makes that happen. It's not prioritized. It is understaffed. We are undertrained. I did not get the safety training, which means, hey, what do you do when you're going out bruised and bleeding and stressed out? I did not get that until well into a month of working with these children. And what I was shocked to find out was when teachers are told, oh, what are you talking about, lesson plans and working directly with the children? No. Your job as a teacher, somebody who's going to school to get all this special knowledge, to work with these kids and make this magic happen, all the latest research and data that people actually have put into practice and are making kids thrive and be able to interact in society and possibly even live independently. Oh, you're not going to be working. You're a manager now. You are a manager. You are to manage the paras and the schedules and make sure all the paperwork is done. I mean, a lot of it is federal laws and regulations, whatever. But when you're, and then they're not given any sort of structure or time to properly even train the paras who, what's the incentive? The people that stick around, there's other reasons between, aside from the fact that the district makes it attractive. They give them reasons to stick around. They went through extensive training telling me how to clock in and out for lunch, show up. Oh, you don't get lunch. You still get paid for it. If we had time to go to the bathroom, it consisted of going to the restroom, locking yourself in the stall, and sobbing because you are trying to learn and deal and you're thrown into the situation. It's stressful for the teachers who, special education teachers are saints. And the only reason you know who the good ones are is because you don't hear about them very often. They give attention to the students in the classrooms that are bleeding.
those, to do theirs more as a broken up, so that they're getting something at least.
Right.
Something's better than nothing.
So again, I had a question, and I think that it might be a dumb question. Overall, it sounds like, according to Dacia, they're not really getting much training at all on anything, let alone diversity training. So it might just be that the actual start is how to be a para and deal with kids that might be biting or scratching or whatever that might be the issues. That to me seems like a real problem if we're not. And I don't know what our training is, but it seems like we probably should have some training for that. But how many paras do we have? How could we, so first of all, first question is how many paras do we have in any given year?
So I wouldn't be able to answer the number of pairs or the training question right now.
Okay. So I think it would be interesting to assess how many paras we have and see if we can do a training specifically for paras at the beginning of every year. Before classes start, so that they would have time to go do it on diversity.
Okay. I was going to, specific to the other, we have training for our paras. Now, I don't know what those specific trainings are, but I know we go through different trainings dependent on what their position is. So I think it varies. Because if you're an general ed instructional para versus a sped para that is in charge of in the autism classroom, it's going to look much different. So it is specialized in that regard. But I'd have to look into the specifics of that to report back to you. The Beyond Diversity piece, though, is not part of the regular training program for a para coming into the district.
And yet they're working one-on-one with students. And to kind of the point of kids coming to school on Wednesday and sort of being horrified. I have a 10-year-old daughter at Cordley, which is an ESL hub, and a lot of the students in her class are international students. And she sat in my lap bawling starting around 10 o'clock that night, on Tuesday night, because it started to look bad. And her concerns are that some of her close friends would be deported or in some way mistreated, and that this person that's been very outwardly awful in public eye is somebody that we kind of elected. And she was very confused, and it was a really difficult conversation for me to have with her, because I didn't even necessarily believe what I was saying to her, right? I couldn't really say like, oh, everything's going to be okay, because I don't really believe that myself. So I understand this notion of how do we explain to our kids who are things are shutting down in their minds. They're confused. They don't get it. They don't see it. So
we're going to know if we're not being honest, by the way.
Of course. And so that's kind of one, issue to this point of how do we even start having this conversation with our children as parents, let alone as teachers. I like the idea of being a lot clearer with very strict statements about what is and is not going to be tolerated, especially at this time when everybody is so heightened. But it seems like we probably should get a pretty detailed report on what's going on with paras so that we can understand and see what's happening.
Anybody else have any comments related to equity? Okay. Shannon, I think you had related to the...
I did. I actually wanted to see if Diane would be able to answer a question about the NRA request related to the public comment on that. And just so people can hear your response, if you could come to the microphone, please. Thank you. Mr. Goff asked about whether we would give a statement of support if the city decided to revisit the issue of the 85% versus 50%. Our motion that's on the agenda tonight is drafted for approval at the 50% level. Is there a process in this in the NRA review process for them to ask for that back to the city, like an appeal, or can you give us some clarity as to what might happen going forward if they are wanting to pursue revisiting the question of 85% with the city.
Oh, sure, I can. The city commission will take up the second reading of the ordinance that adopts the NRA plan, and that includes the percentages and the participation from each of the taxing jurisdictions in it. They consider that tomorrow evening, although the city commission did take action at their meeting previously to authorize it at the 50%. And then in between, the county took action and as was indicated, had approved it at the 85% level. So my guess is it's on their agenda tomorrow evening. They'll decide what they would like to do, and we can certainly pass on any action that you all take.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any other board commentary?
I guess on that item, if we take action at the 50% and then they revisit it, we could always have it brought back here. Would that delay things?
I'm going to pull it from consent.
Okay.
And get there to have that discussion. Thanks. I actually did have one, and I'll make it very brief. I just wanted to report back to the board that I attended the KASB Board of Directors meeting on November 5th, and they had an update on the budget. You know, we had some new numbers come out even after that meeting. Their report was kind of grim, and it got even worse. They have completed their rewrite of their legislative policy statements, and I believe that was circulated to the board. If you have feedback to share with myself and Jessica as the alternate for that, their amendment process, if you want to amend something like that, you have to submit the amendment a couple days ahead of time. So if there are things that we have concerns about that we would want to try to amend, let's have a discussion about that at the second November meeting so that we can draft something to put together. I was heartened that the Legislative Committee did take the approach to the position for KASB on teacher due process of encouraging coordination between the KNEA, the two superintendent groups, KSDE, to formulate a joint position. I think that's a very healthy step forward from where KASB has been on that issue in the past, and certainly would be more in line with our own discussions in that area. So just wanted to share that, and that's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Shannon. So we'll pull the item from the consent agenda, and we'll put it right before the first report. Consent agenda items are next. So these are consent agenda items are those that are considered routine and are adopted by one motion unless any board member or the superintendent requests that an item be removed. The item or items removed are voted on separately. So do I have a motion?
I move that we approve the consent agenda with the change of removing the item for the request from City of Lawrence for neighborhood revitalization area onto our business agenda for further discussion.
A second?
Second.
Janice?
Yes.
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 Okay, so let's go ahead and discuss the NRA item. Shannon, do you have something you want to start with?
I think, so it raises an interesting procedural question for us because of the way these approvals work. If we, the county approved it at 85%, we have it on our agenda to approve at 50% because we typically follow the lead of the city on these issues. But if they were to make a request at the meeting tomorrow night to revisit that based on all of the conditions that Mr. Goff described regarding their the gap analysis, et cetera, I guess I wanted to have the discussion of would we be willing to revisit that to give them some clarity, or if anybody at that point has any desire to approve it differently than what's been recommended in the motion. and I said I would do this if I ended up pulling it. I have a lot of frustration. I sat on the PERC, the Public Incentive Review Committee, for I think 2 years.
Who's the current rep?
Possibly 3. I think it's Chris. And I've had frustration that I expressed as I was, particularly in the last year I was on the PERC, about the analysis that the city does, the cost-benefit analysis, and the way that it is presented in those documents. And it kind of plays into this whole discussion, because every time the analysis shows, if it meets the threshold to even get to the PERC, it always shows a much greater financial benefit to the school district than to any of the other parties that are being asked to vote on it. And I think that's probably driven in part by the fact that our mill levy is the largest portion of the levy that's being abated. But we all know good and well that we don't see $1 of additional tax benefit in our budgets, whether we approve it or not approve it. Like, it has zero impact, because all of those additional dollars go directly to the state to then be redistributed through the school finance formula. So it has no impact on us, and so just that, it makes it really difficult for us to vote on these, because the report from the city gives a misimpression to our community about what we're voting on in the first place. And so I had pushed at the time that I was still on the committee to re-examine that, and didn't really make any headway. I'd like to reopen that conversation, and we've talked at board leadership about how we need to have some engagement again on that issue, because it's having to, every time we do one of these, explain, well, no, if we abate it at whatever level, we're not actually taking money out of our budget now or in the future, because it's not money we would have ever gotten anyway, because by virtue of the way that the school finance formula works, or the block grant that we're currently under. So that's my little rant about the process. So that being said, I don't necessarily have real strong feeling one way or another whether we approve it at 50% or 85%. And I think historically we've taken the city's lead on what they want to do. This is an instance where the city and the county don't agree, and we're kind of stuck in the middle. So I guess if anybody has anything to weigh in about on that.
Just a clarification, what county approved, how much? 85 and city 50. I mean, to me, it's infill. It meets the affordable housing portion and job creation. So I'm fine with it.
And I think where this gets.
This is a good example of what everybody has been saying that they want, right. And adding population to.
And where it's gotten caught up is the political discussion of the city about what level of incentives they should be providing at all. So currently the policy still says, you can ask for up to 50%, but oh, by the way, you can ask for more if you meet some additional circumstances. It sounds like in this case the project did check those boxes, and they went through the additional analysis. It is a very political decision for the city commission on that question of incentives in general. And so, but the policy still, if the policy says what it says, and I think Mr. Goff is right about that part of this request.
I would agree, and I think the county's been a little more consistent about the levels that they're approving, and maybe the rules haven't changed as frequently or as recently, but I would be comfortable with approving it 85%, but I don't know how everyone else feels.
I mean, I would follow the city just because historically we have, and the other issue that I have with us voting on this in general is that those reports aren't, the pros and cons are primarily with respect to the community at large, the city, and this particular project looks like it has all the, meets all the criteria and looks good. It's just that in terms of laying out cost benefits, there isn't anything specifically with respect to the district. In terms of benefits, what are the impacts on school populations? What are the, I mean, just that type of, if we're going to be voting on it, it seems like that I would have that kind of information. And without that information, we typically just follow the city. And so at this point, I would follow the city, what they decide. So whether it's 50% or 85%. So yeah, that's, I'm wondering, should we delay this and just wait for the city to make their final action?
Great. Is there a harm in that? Like if we approve this tonight and then if the city revisits it, then
The harm in it is that the city, what they are set to approve tomorrow night, and Diane, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but what they're set to approve tomorrow night would be the final ordinance authorizing the district. So everybody else participating in the district has to already have made their decision about that.
I see.
Before the city can approve the final ordinance, which is why when they set up these schedules, there's usually like a specific meeting that they want us to act by because it feeds into that schedule about the second reading of the ordinance. Like I said, I don't have a strong preference either way. Personally, I think as a kind of an institutional practice of what we've done in the past, Marcel was absolutely right that we've typically followed the city's lead. So my suggestion then maybe would be, unless other board members object, that I would make the motion to approve it at 50% with the caveat that if they decide to revisit, the city decides to revisit the level, that we would be open to revisiting it at that point if that's still procedurally a possibility. Vanessa?
yeah, I'm comfortable with that.
Okay.
Do you want to make the motion?
Yeah, I'll make the motion. I need to pull up the actual enclosure though. And also with the encouragement that we really do have a conversation, a policy conversation going forward about the process, particularly as it affects the school district, because I think it would help us make better decisions.
Consistently. At the joint meeting, perhaps.
Yeah,
the next.
maybe at the next joint meeting. All right. I move the Board of Education approve participation in the request by Williams Management LLC for the establishment of a neighborhood revitalization area rebate for 826 Pennsylvania Street at 50% for a period of 10 years, with the understanding that if the city of Lawrence were to change that level of approval for the rebate, that we would bring that back to our board and revisit the discussion.
Yeah. You have a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? Okay. Janice, do you need to call?
Yes?
Yes.
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 So let's move on to our first report. Update on next generation science standards, progress, with Terry McEwen, Director, Curriculum, Instruction, and Assessment.
There we are. We're going to do a brief update on the progress on next generation science standards implementation across our district. And we're going to reference first the board goal on college career readiness, continuing to align core curriculum and resources to the Kansas college and career ready standards in all the subject areas. This one specifically is going to be about NGSS. To do that, I'm going to introduce Erica Keller, who is elementary curriculum facilitator, and Sunny Halstead, who is secondary curriculum facilitator, both in the area of science. So they will take it from here. Erica.
Hello. As Terry said, I'm Erica Keller. I actually have been in the district. This is my 6th year, so I came out of the elementary classroom at 1st grade and 3rd grade. Just to give you a quick update, the Next Generation Science Standards, or NGSS, were adopted in April 2013. In the school year of 13-14, we had our first TOSA, and as a science leadership team, which I was a part of back then, we just began to plan. In 14-15, we shared the NGSS standards with buildings and began to talk about the changes and investigated how they aligned with the instructional resources that we had at the time and ones that were coming out. And then last year, 15-16, we actually field tested 3 instructional resources, 1 each trimester in 2nd and 5th grade. Currently, we have 21 teachers who are continuing a field test of one of the programs. The staff that is not on the field test are using the FOSS kits that we've been using, and they have enhancements. I've been creating a science master course K-5 on Blackboard that every teacher in the district has access to, both classroom and SPED, and both general and special education classrooms have access to that. And then there's also additional add-ons to align to the NGSS that come with the kits. When I got into the position, I've talked with 2 of the field testers just to get me an update. I've been part of the science leadership team, but I was not a field tester myself. So I just wanted an update of how they felt the program was going. October 13th, we brought my science team that could make it in. There's 14 teachers and 1 principal that are on the science leadership team. And we talked with them, and I introduced myself. I knew most of them since I'd been on the team, but just an introduction, and then also an update on what the progress was going so far. And then tomorrow we're actually going to meet as a science leadership team and with all the field testers that can make it, and we're going to also hear from them and see how they're feeling about the field test. After initial observations of the field test, though, I have looked into alternatives, and those 2 are Discovery Education textbooks, tech books. They are NGSS aligned. We've also had a relationship with Discovery Education or United Streaming for 15 plus years, so it's a program we use, and this would be an add-on. It's very much a personalized program, and it aligns with our personalized and blending goals. The other one is called Mystery Science, and this would be in conjunction with it. It is NGSS aligned. It's very engaging, and it's also investigative. The goals of the science leadership team are, and as we look into a new resource, is to align to the standards, that it's culturally relevant, user-friendly for teachers and students. It aligns with the district and board goals, and that we have the ability to personalize and blend for our students. And some things to keep in mind that as listening to teachers and coming from the classroom, currently the materials are housed in the IRC, and then they are sent out every trimester, and there is a rotation for them for the kits, and teachers would like them to be more in the building so that they can use them when they see fit to align to other instruction that they may have. So we would like to have the materials in the classroom or in the buildings. Also, professional development for whatever program that we look at would be during the summer, and if we are able to make a decision earlier in the spring. And another thing is we just want to make sure that every teacher is teaching science standards every day. That's the elementary.
Like Terry said, my name is Sunny Halstead. I am the secondary science curriculum facilitator. Previous to this position, I taught 8th grade science at West Middle School for the past 5 years. So I was very aware of NGSS and the changes that would need to occur in our schools. So with that, I would like actually to take a moment to congratulate and thank our teachers, because change is very difficult and they've done an amazing job. We have very passionate and dedicated educators in our district, and I'm really, really honored to work with them in this capacity. So I just want to let you know that. So first of all, when NGSS was adopted in Kansas in 2013, we spent a couple years in Lawrence really understanding what that meant and how that would need to change our science curriculum. If you remember in the middle school, we used to have a science domain model, and that meant we assigned a science domain to each grade level. So 6th grade was life science, 7th grade was earth science, and then 8th grade physical science. After looking at the different models, we would need to adapt, I suppose, to implement the NGSS standards. The science leadership team came to an agreement to do the conceptual progression model. And you might hear that being described as a spiral curriculum, where we teach the different standards, life, earth, physical, and earth space. I'm sorry, I said it twice, at every grade level, so that the kids are continuing to get those standards and they're going deeper and deeper as they go along. This is an interdisciplinary approach that helps us integrate ELA and math standards into science. So before we can implement, there's quite a process to go through. The first thing we need to do is understand the standards. They're quite different than what we're used to. So at the middle school level, not only do we need to see what they're coming in with, the knowledge that they bring with them, but the knowledge that they need to have so that they can be successful in high school. So the teachers work really hard understanding the standards, looking at the disciplinary core ideas, using those practices and cross-cutting concepts in order to teach the students what they need to know. Once they do that and they understand the standards, for an example, 8th grade has 22 standards, so it takes quite a bit of time to do that. Then they come up with a sequence, and this is probably our biggest challenge, is to understand how to sequence those standards in a way that they're integrated and not in the traditional units that we're used to studying or teaching. So that's where a lot of our struggle is right now. And then we have teachers that will make a Blackboard master course. And this is a place where all teachers can go in that grade level, get lab activities, videos, readings, so that we have all of our materials housed in one place. And once we have all of that in place, then we can implement. And so at the middle school level, can't really see, it's in white on the left side. So our 6th grade was our first level that implemented. And so they are in the 2nd year of implementation. And so they're continuing to work together with colleagues in their buildings and across the district to continually improve their instruction, make adjustments as they go along. Our 7th grade team is in the 1st year of their implementation, and so they've spent a lot of time planning and working together. And with any change, they've seen some success and they've seen some bumps in the road, but we're reflecting continually and making notes to improve instruction for next year. Our 8th grade teachers are just beginning to understand the standards and start that planning work. And so they have time set aside that they come out of the classroom. We work district-wide to do that work together. And in fact, today was one of those days. I had all the 8th grade teachers in the district in, and we invited some biology teachers from the high schools to come and work with us on some life science standards that are in our 8th and 9th grade courses so that we are vertically aligning. We found that to be very beneficial and very helpful, and we're hoping in the future as one of our goals to have our middle school and high school colleagues together so that we continue that vertical alignment. So at the high school level, it is a similar implementation process. They are at a little bit of a different timeline right now, so I invited a colleague from Free State to kind of talk to you about the high school.
So my name is Othar Strotter, and I'm the Science Department Chair at Lawrence Free State High School. And this is my second go-around with national science standards. The last time that the nation as a whole adopted a new science standards was in '96, the National Science Education Standards. And so the next generation science standards came out in 2013, and that's when Lawrence started looking at them. We had representatives, 3 from each high school, that met during the 13, 14, and 15, 16 school years at the high school level. This Science Leadership Committee researched several different implementation plans. And the plan that we chose to use was having district-level meetings between the 2 high schools, as well as focusing the implementation of NGSS during our PLC meetings. So far the biology curriculum committee has met. They met last year during 15 and 16 to decide how they were going to implement the life science and some of the or space science standards into the biology course. Currently, the chemistry curriculum committee has met once and will meet several more times this school year to do the same thing for the chemistry standards that are in the physical science realm. And next year, the physics curriculum committee will meet. These committees consist of 3 or 4 biology, chemistry, physics teachers from each of the high schools. The main portion of the implementation for NGSS at the high school level has occurred during our PLCs. We meet every other week during these Wednesday late arrivals, and we've been splitting up into 3 groups, the biology teachers, the chemistry teachers, and the physics teachers. And we've been looking at what have we been doing the previous 2 weeks with regards to our instruction. What were some successes? What were some failures? What are we going to do to help those students that were failing or did not get the content? And what are we going to do the next 2 weeks? So this focus on implementing these NGSS standards as well as student learning that we do during these PLC meetings. And so like I said before, what we're trying to do is look at what we did the previous 2 weeks where we didn't meet. What was some successes? What are some things that we need to help our students relearn? And what are we going to do the next 2 weeks? And just if you're unfamiliar with NGSS, this is a kind of a 3-way sort of focus that NGSS has. The overriding cross-cutting concepts that we're trying to teach in all of our courses. What are some of the basic core ideas, the content that we're teaching? And kind of a new thing is what are we going to be doing to teach the students science practices in addition to the content, the learning objectives that the students should be having.
Any questions?
Anybody have any questions?
Just really glad to see this work, and I wish I had learned science this way.
I know.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I know there's been some more resistance at the high school level. How is that progressing? Everybody has their silos, and it's.
Yeah.
I don't think at Free State there's much resistance. I just think that the resistance that we have is just normal, things are changing kind of thing. I think that it was quite fortuitous that this adoption of the PLC process that occurred last year was the kind of first year we had the true PLCs alternating with the plan weeks. I think that was fortuitous because it allowed us to have a dedicated time. I think that when you say, let's implement NGSS and we'll talk about it periodically, once a quarter or whatever, it's difficult to do that. But I think that we have these hour-long meetings every other week where we can focus on, how are we going to implement this NGSS standard the next 2 weeks. And so, I don't think I see that. Speaking from Free State's perspective, at least.
Okay. That's good to hear.
I think we're trapped in that dual world of wanting to move to the more integration, but yet, as long as the Board of Regents names physics and chemistry, we're kind of stuck in that realm as well. So I think the high school teachers have done a remarkable job of working together to craft their nimble response to how they can make it all work.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you.
It's good to hear. Thank you. Okay, our next report is an update on school finance and legislative priorities with Kathy Johnson, Director of Finance.
Good evening. Tonight, I think, is to give you guys an opportunity to have a little bit of a discussion about moving forward with, I guess I need to put this on, with some input for a new school finance framework. And also then it's kind of the time of year for legislative priorities, and some of those are the same thing. So hopefully I can go into lots of detail or less detail, whatever helps your discussion, I think, is really kind of what I'm hoping to do. So there's been some information that's also been shared with you. So a little bit of background in that in 2015, the legislature repealed the 1992 school finance formula, replaced it with the 2-year block grant system. That expires in 2017. So they are going to need to go through the process of developing a new school finance formula, go back to the old. They've got to come up with something, or theoretically they could extend the block grant. So tonight we're hoping to have that discussion a little bit. And one of the things that the governor's office is saying is we'll accept input through November 30 from any interested party telling us what they think school finance should look like. And so thinking that the district maybe ought to try to submit something that is sort of in the pool with what that might look like. So a little bit of a timeline. There is a kind of a draft input outline for a school finance framework that we shared with you, as well as the Finance Advisory Council had a look at it on October 20th. There's been a kind of a 3-question online survey that was done, and there's some input from that. So tonight we're going to try to have a little bit of a discussion on sort of that draft outline of the input for the school finance framework. Anything that we would want to readdress with the Finance Advisory Council coming this Wednesday, and then bring back to the board that kind of approval of what we would submit for the 30th. As well as it's kind of that time of year to have you start working on your legislative priorities, and whether you approve it at the 28th or the first one in December, just kind of trying to get on the table. I believe there's usually something that the city and the county and the school district and chamber kind of have as a legislative priority session that we want to have that ready for when the time comes, and hopefully have allowed you some discussion as to what's on there without having to do it the last minute. So.
Do we have a date for that? Has that been set? I haven't seen anything.
I don't believe that
Okay.
it has been, yeah. Unless, I think Julie said right before the meeting she hadn't heard anything. So the next is just to kind of give you an idea, the 3 survey questions that were done is kind of what it will take financially for Kansas to lead the world in the success of each student. And I believe some of this, Kyle maybe provided you the results of some of that. But the general consensus from that question was basically we want equal and adequate funding, and it should be more. Most are not knowing how more is, what that magic number is, but that was sort of the general theme of the response there. The second question was more about what we think Kansas should fund, eliminate, or change. And that pretty much mirrored kind of what the top public school funding priorities should be. It was similar to the first question answered and similar to the third. So they all kind of ended up with a little bit of the same theme. So I captured on the question 3 kind of what are those top public school funding priorities, and they're real general categories. They're not in any particular order. It's what was turned in the survey. You know, we had staff responses, we had community responses from parents, and so this was kind of the general things that were on there, and they're all things that we're doing. I would say they're probably not all inclusive of the board goals, because one of the things I don't see on there is maybe the funding priority for our equity work. That wasn't something there, and would be something that we would. But this list, if you think about it, really is more representative of what you as a school board will do with whatever funding pool we're given by the state. This is more not what you would necessarily want in a program in a prescriptive manner. What you would want is that formula to give you a big enough pool of dollars for then you as a local board to be able to allocate those resources to the various things that you as a school board find to be the priority for the district and in Lawrence. So they're very important. A lot of them are things that are things that we're doing. There's probably some things missing on it. And so this is kind of a reminder a little bit of here's what our community and our staff are thinking we as a board or as a district should have as priorities for funding, but it doesn't get us the nuts and bolts of what maybe needs to be in the finance framework to help us get that big enough pool of dollars that we hope to have to do all these things. because it's a pretty inclusive list, both core-wise and enhancement-wise, when you think about it. And so some of the information that was handed out to you was the USA group and a lot of subsidiary groups provided a framework for a new school finance formula. It's about 20-some pages, and I can click into the details and share more of that if you want to look at some of that. KASB has been doing a blog with lots of really good information on key facts for Kansas education history, and so that link there takes you into that blog. And then the KASB, as was mentioned earlier, has kind of done their final committee report on legislative stance. And so a lot of the information in those previous 3 documents, along with discussion in Finance Advisory Council and some of the online survey, has kind of created what I will go into. And again, I can go back into some of the other if you want to. A draft of what is sort of the beginnings of that outline for input on a school finance formula framework. And the first part of the document really is kind of outlining what is our board goal and our kind of mission statement has been. And I won't read it, the top part to you verbatim, but it's, we're wanting to look at educational opportunities for all and making sure that it's inclusive of those things that we feel are important and a high priority for the board. So when you think about the nuts and bolts, it isn't so much fund a certain staff ratio or fund AVID or fund. It's really addressing how are we going to compute that big pool of dollars that is going to be equitably and adequately distributed to districts across the state, and what needs to be considered when they come up with that magic formula. And so the things are, some of them obvious, being constitutional requirements of equity and adequacy. We want that to be met. But ensuring students have equal opportunity for college and career ready as defined by the Rose standards, assuming that's going through. But then recognizing that students require greater support and instruction to meet those standards, particularly students at risk. So supporting the fact that there should be funding related to those extra at-risk components, supporting additional funding costs, so the formula should include things that support the college and career tech ready, because those have additional expenditures that are beyond average classrooms, supporting funding for additional costs of teaching ESL, supporting additional costs of student transportation. One of the suggestions was instead of 2.5 miles and over, maybe that's dropped to 1 mile and over for funding, and something less being for qualified reasons. So those are some suggestions or kinds of things that are included in this sort of draft. Supporting full funding for special education, supporting full funding for all-day kindergarten, support and strengthen funding for early childhood, parents as teachers, teacher mentoring, actually funding the National Board Certified Stipend instead of making it an unfunded mandate. The same with professional development. There's something in the statute, but they don't fund it. So supporting full funding of that professional development. That funding should be based on enrollment, that it should be a known and audited number, not something that we're guessing at all the time and chasing clear till June, that it should be predictable for both budgeting by the school districts and budgeting by the states. So there is no surprises. And it should have an annual cost of living and CPI kind of thing. That we should have carryover of cash balances because they support growth in a following year, cash flow, unforeseen circumstances. The district should have that contingency reserve fund, that we want to recognize and believe in local control, that districts, boards know the most efficient way to spend those resources for their community, so that, again, not prescriptive, but allowing it to give local boards that flexibility in allocating students, allowing for a local option budget authority, so that it's enrichment and enhancement and beyond a base budget, that it's equalized, and that you, as a local board, don't have to go to the state for a referendum or something to allow yourselves to go, for those funds. A little bit about capital outlay and constitutional equity there. Bond and interest This one is just maybe stating, and again, these can all change. These are just ideas that were put out there as sort of what makes sense and what's worked or seems to have worked in the past, as long as it's funded at the adequate level. I think part of what's always happened with every formula is you put all this out there and they start funding it and they do a really good job for a few years, and then they can't fund it anymore, and that's when a formula doesn't work anymore. It's not so much that the formula itself is wrong, it's the funding support for the formula. And a lot of these components are coming from these other documents or things that as a district we have supported currently and in the past, and they're not necessarily something new. It's a lot of old formulas that are still good things, but they need to be funded at an adequate level. Kind of going into a little bit about maybe the new facilities, and instead of it being on a student count, that it should be on a square footage or something that makes a little more sense, is a suggestion. That we should remain as tax-exempt entities as a political subdivision of the state. That the state tax policy that the state considers needs to be balanced and sustainable. And that it shouldn't depend on your zip code as far as what you have to fund versus another district. And then things that maybe to consider not included, tied to teacher performance, tied to student assessment, participation in the state health coverage plan, those kinds of things. You know, there's been talk from previous formulas about not allowing state aid to be used for extracurricular activities or not being allowed to use for food service. So stating that we don't support that maybe should be something that we consider. So this is sort of to get something out there to get you thinking about nuts and bolts of a formula, not so much what we want to fund with what we get, but what are the things that are important as we think about that. And so this is to sort of help generate some of that discussion, the wordsmithing, the inclusion of what you want to include or maybe exclude. We can do some of that tonight, or I think Kyle mentioned maybe we let you chew on a little bit, have some discussion, and then provide some feedback by a certain date. I think you were thinking maybe the 21st. Is that what you were thinking? To come back with something by the 28th. We do need to submit something by the 30th to the governor's office, so we're kind of in that time frame.
Yeah, I think so. We have the Finance Advisory Council meeting this Thursday, so they'll get a second look at this and a little bit more discussion. But tonight was a little bit of opportunity, I think, for you to share some thoughts, have some discussion here. Obviously walk away with maybe some things to think about and then bring those back to us, probably to Janice. And with the holiday, it may be good to have them by the end of the week. But if it's not till Monday morning, that's okay, or happens over the weekend, that's fine. Just so it gives us time to put together a final draft, because it does have to be submitted on November 30th. We'd like to have the board approve it really at the November 28th meeting. So Kathy would come back, show you what the final draft looks like, this in combination with the legislative priorities document, and the board could bless it at that time.
I can pull up, but I think we've been shared the 16 legislative priorities, and the first finance section probably ties a lot with whatever you kind of end up with this part, and then there's some other things on that priorities. So again, feedback on that document as well, and I can pull up the 16 if you want to. I think we sent it as an email, but that would also be part of the discussion to be able to bring back some updates for you for the 20th board meeting.
Rick, did you have a comment?
Well, yeah, I mean, and I appreciate the idea that we'll kind of chew on this and get you feedback. I guess my question is there anything in here that we disagree with? Is there anything that's obviously missing? So I'm happy to go through the process, but this looks pretty damn comprehensive. And so, I guess my feedback will be, this looks great.
Do you feel like it's necessary to address the timing of funding, or we used to, is it just one chunk, or as far as cash flow goes, or maybe even the timeliness of What problems have we had in the past in regards to timeliness of either communicating how much we're going to get or when we will receive it? I kind of feel like there were issues in the past in regards to those.
Part of knowing what we're going to receive, and that is not having an enrollment or a final budget known until June. So having something that we're basing on, whether it's last year's enrollment or something that's just a known and it's not going to change on us throughout the year, and the legislature knows it's not going to change throughout the year, that they know going into July for next year, this is your funding, then they'll do a better job, we think, of allowing equal and payments on a monthly basis, unless for some reason they just don't have the money at the state. And so when we've not been paid, it's been a result of them not having the cash in their bank accounts. So it's kind of twofold there. They have not had funding in order to pay it timely, so then that's created delays on our end. And part of their dilemma, as much as it is ours, is they don't necessarily know what the number is. It's constantly changing all year, and it's known so late in the year, or all of a sudden in January, enrollment went up, 200 kids across the state, and it's several $1 million more than what they planned for, a year ago. And so then that's what creates. So part of the hope would be in some of the suggestion of doing it on a number that we know and can plan both for our side and the legislative side will help with that delay of payment. And the tax policy piece is what's going to help us with not getting late payments from the state, that they've got to have the cash flow themselves to help our cash flow. So I think those two things are hopefully will be helped with something like that, but there's probably no guarantee. Yeah.
It probably wouldn't be a bad idea to go ahead and state that we expect, timely payments every month, and I would say by June 30 we get our final payment, so that it's not coming in July 10th.
Well, and especially since we have no reserves, and I just would hate to go back to that 20 years ago.
Yeah, and that was my other question. Do we have anything in here about reserves? What we think we? You may have gone over and I missed it. Sorry.
There is something in here about
Okay.
allow for carry of cash balance in all funds. That cash balances will help support that growth in the following year. Cash flow, unforeseen circumstances, helping you long range plan a little bit. And that also, on top of that, there should be that contingency reserve type fund. The number I keep hearing thrown around is the GASB, which is the governmental accepted standards for accounting. They talk about that 15% as kind of where they're looking at but they haven't said which cash balances are included, and we're arguing a little bit about it. It shouldn't be bond and interest, it shouldn't be capital. So I think that'll be just hashed around in the minutia of the whole thing when we get there. And I can see that it's probably fair to have some sort of a lid on that so that there's not 100% of cash balances, if you're not going to ever spend it, then you probably don't need it. But putting a percent in here would be something that we could do. I don't know that I would necessarily want to put a percent on the contingency reserve. That's hard enough to kind of fill those coffers anyway. Following the GASB standards might make sense for the cash balances, and then maybe identifying which funds we would want to be included in that percentage, and taking out like the healthcare reserve or the contingency reserve and the capital outlay and bond and interest, and maybe giving them a piece of that formula to chew on in a little more nuts and bolts piece.
And would you want to even go as far as specifying, we've had this conversation over and over about specifying a date at which they should measure the amount of the district cash balances, because KPI always wants to talk about it at July 1, and that's the totally wrong date to measure the actual amount of cash balances that we carry. So perhaps being more explicit about
having it be more of an average or something that's a little more, or the
instead of
low
cherry-picking
point or
a high point and saying that we're underspending. I had a couple of comments. Okay. One thing I didn't see mentioned, and maybe it's up there, but I just missed it as we scrolled through the first page. We mentioned the row standards, but we didn't mention cans and can. the State Board of Ed. And I actually think that the State Board of Ed plan is a better, more comprehensive. The Rose standards, I know the court adopted them and the legislature adopted them, but they leave a lot of things out. They're really not as comprehensive as you would like to see. So making sure we mention Kansans Can. And one of the things that's in that we've talked about is particularly the issue of counselors and guidance and support staff for students, being able to support that idea of personalized learning plans for all students. We discussed this at the fall summit that we went to, that in order to do that, you really got to have more money for guidance counselors in particular to be able to make that happen. And then another thing I'll throw out for consideration is we talked about our overall funding being tied to the cost of living adjustments, et cetera. But one of the things that I think sometimes is lost in the discussion about school finance is that when we're talking about this, we're really talking about our teacher salaries and our staff salaries. And so I don't know, finding some way to be more explicit about the formula needs to allow us to pay our staff at a more competitive rate. Like we're steadily filing down, sliding down the hill as compared to other states in terms of where we rank for teacher pay, and whatever they design needs to allow us to move back up the hill.
And I have that point here. Like, I think something about being able to recruit and retain highly qualified staff, not only for the fact that we have to give raises and benefits end up costing more, health insurance costs increase, all of those things. But I think it shouldn't just be teachers. I think it's all staff. I mean, we just had a classified study of rates that we need to pay in order to recruit and retain highly qualified staff in those categories as well. So, yeah, something on here. I mean, that's tied to how many students you have and all of that, but I think explicitly talking about staff recruiting and retainment.
But I do agree with Rick. This is very comprehensive, and I, other than the couple things I mentioned, I can't think of anything else that's missing. So thank you. This is really very.
Yeah, it is.
Good.
It is comprehensive.
I do want to make sure that when we send this to the governor's website, that we also email it to the other emails that have been provided, like KSB is keeping track of all the input. They're collecting the input and have asked people to submit it to them as well so that they know what the governor's receiving from districts.
We'll check.
Okay. Yeah, transparency check. So the governor can't say, I only heard from 5 school districts, and no, wait. We got CC'd on all these emails here.
Yeah.
Can't say that.
Yeah. Well, any input or anything you think of,
So
let us know. So that
Friday or Monday morning at the latest. Okay.
if you have a suggested way to state something, happy, anything to kind of. The other piece then is with you is your legislative priorities from 2016. And again, there's sort of an overview here and some bullet points about school finance and state revenue reform. So some of that you may want to tie back to what we just talked about. And then as a second part of that, there's some things about governance, election, curriculum, personnel capers. This is what has been kind of your past or last year's. So I don't know how in-depth you've had as a discussion or change with this. So I know that you'll want to have it updated for when we have that legislative priorities group meeting. And I know Julie usually helps with the crafting of summarizing what you guys put into it. I think you.
And that typically happens like the Friday or Saturday morning. This is typically the Saturday morning before the session starts. Yeah.
So I think whether it's the 28th or the first meeting in December, having something you've settled on so that we can help have that in place so that whoever is going to present that on behalf of the board has some time to.
Could you scroll back to the elections?
Mm-hmm.
So I'll throw this out there, and I don't know if other people agree or if it's even relevant. I'd really like to see the municipal elections move back to the spring rather than this the fall elections. Is there a place for that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it used to be there. Then we took it out when it. Right.
Well, if we, I would argue for adding it back if we agree that's the more sane way to do it.
That's definitely a point of discussion amongst our districts, I think, elsewhere as well. I know KASB's position on it is they're not going to specifically advocate for changing it back to April, but they are going to specifically advocate for keeping it an odd number of years and keeping it nonpartisan and not changing the organizational date for school districts, because there's the two pieces. There's when you're elected, and then there's when we're required by law to have that organizational meeting, and they are advocating to keep that at July 1, waiting to see what happens this session, and perhaps supporting a move back to April if it came up. They're not going to oppose that, but they. So I think it would be good for us to, if that's the agreement amongst the board, I think it would be good for us to advocate for that, because we might. There might not be as many voices that are specifically stating that, but I think you're right. It's particularly for school districts, the move does not make operational sense. It might make operational sense for cities and counties, but definitely not for us.
It makes no sense.
Well, it does if your ultimate intention is to make them partisan in an even number of years. Perfect sense.
and of course that is the intent.
Right.
But if nothing else, to have people take over in the middle of a fiscal year,
right.
And that doesn't just affect us.
An academic year and in the middle of it, yeah, right.
Do we know, so I know the election happens in November, but when do we vacate our seats and new people come on? Okay. Like the first meeting in January?
The first meeting in January, yeah. January 1, but just like, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I would support putting that on there. Yeah. All right. Same thing. If anybody has any comments, want it back by Friday, Monday at the latest.
Yeah, so, I mean, I guess your thoughts on the legislative priority document, that doesn't have to go out, for approval on the 28th necessarily. But, the sooner we have feedback on that, the better, obviously, as far as what that draft looks like. So.
Does that feedback go to you?
Go ahead and send it to Janice. Yeah.
So
Any
that's
other
all.
questions?
Unless there's other questions or something that's kind of was.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Do we have a motion for adjournment? Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.